Hey, what's up? Oh my god, I'm dying. This is Infinity. I'm actually Jack, one of the only male identities in my system. It's really funny. I was about to do this video as a completely different identity. I don't know which one it is. There's this particular identity. We have a lot of identities that can't really decide on a name, and they're just kind of like a name. I guess I'll think about it, and then I dramatically look out the window, and then like 10 years later, I guess I might finally come up with a name. It's like I just keep not coming up with one in a bunch of different identities that are really consistent. That's one of those. I'm gonna name it though, and I am going to name that identity. I don't know. What's a nice thing that people like? Glacier. The name is now Glacier. Isn't that a great name? I'm so good at names. So I wanted to talk about sexuality and DID. I personally identify as bisexual. I would say I'm generally always attracted to both genders, adults only, obviously. I'm not into like kids. I do have a sexual fetish, which is fairly inoffensive. There's nothing weird about it. It's just like a weight gain kind of thing, like feederism, which I feel is more common than people realize, because like I don't know, throughout my life I've met a couple of weight gain fetishists, and I met a lot of people that prefer men or women that are overweight. I just feel like it's kind of a fairly mundane sexual preference at this point. A lot of people have it to some extent, but that's not what I wanted to talk about. So I usually prefer men in most of my identities, but I do have a couple of identities that prefer women, and I have a couple of identities that perceive themselves as male. So I was born female, and I usually present as female, but I do get gender dysphoria in the identities that are male. I would say about 25% of my identities are male. About 25% don't have a gender or sexuality whatsoever. So I do sometimes identify with the asexual construct, but it's not accurate. Usually I enjoy very mundane sex with fat dudes. That's it. Me personally, this version of me does not really experience the weight fetish, so it's just, but a lot of me is really into that fetish. And what's interesting about the fetish is I had this abuser when I was a kid named Jim Berlin, and he was a weight gain fetishist, and he was kind of into everything. He was like into kids and adults. I think just women, probably, from what I remember. And he had a weight gain fetish. He like coached me. I'm not the identity that this happened to. That's one of the identities. I think Red remembers that. But I was coached to like turn him on with like, oh my God, you're so fat today. Oh my God, you're eating so much. You know, like, I don't want to get into it because it'll trigger me, but like there are certain things you can say to like a weight gain fetishist, and he like trained me to do that. It's part of my trauma. Anyway, so it like hardwired a part of myself into being really into that. But I guess that must not be my default sexuality. So that's a really interesting thing I think about. It's like, did my abuse cause my really weird sexuality, which has the whole weight gain thing? I have some alternate identities that are sadistic, like in a BDSM kind of way, but most of me is not into that. And they're really usually only like that with people that have mistreated me in some way. So I wouldn't really say I'm into BDSM, but a part of me does kind of have like a sexualized sadomasochism, and it's like 100% related to things that I've experienced in my abuse. I've talked to other people, and most people are like, oh no, my fetish has nothing to do with my life, it's just random. And I look at my sexuality in my life and I'm like, mine's not random though. But yeah, so I would never, okay, back to the male identities. I would never transition though, because then I would get gender dysphoria for being female. So when I was about 15 to the age of 17, I presented as male online. I didn't even present as transgender. I was just male. It's like, I'm male. Yep, don't, like, I'm not trans, just I was born a man. You know, the internet offers you a lot of freedom. I was, you know, what's that joke that all the women on the internet are men? I was like the reverse trap. I was the man that was actually a pretty cute woman. So I did that. I lived as a man until the age of 17. I was actually going to get on hormone therapy. I was seeing a therapist. I can't even remember his name now. He was out in Perrysburg or whatever. And I was diagnosed with gender identity disorder and everything. So I did not end up transitioning though, because I started having dysphoria and wanted to be female. I would say 50% of my alters experience themselves as female and strongly attracted to men, and I'd say about half of those are strongly attracted to women as well as men. And there are a couple of alters that are really only attracted to women. So I have to kind of like go, it's almost like I have to make a flow chart of my sexuality. It's compartmentalized into so many different alters. And, you know, the ones that are interested in women remember being raped by women as a child, like my neighbor and my mom. So, I don't know. Okay, so the weird thing about my mom and my sister is I remember them raping me, but the thing is, I don't know if they were really culpable for their actions. I suspect that they were being drugged and raped and kind of threatened into doing an incest film. I guess is what... it's a really weird memory that I have. Because everyone's always just like, the women in your family didn't molest you. It's like, I definitely don't think my sister did voluntarily. I don't know. It's a weird kind of memory. I have a lot of those where it's like, I have some of my ex-friend Alyssa, where we were in this forced pornography type situation, and Alyssa and I were forced to have sex with each other when we did not want to. Neither of us wanted to, I don't believe. I definitely didn't want to. And it's just really weird. It's weird to explain that, too, because it's like, I was being abducted and drugged. I was not culpable for anything that was happening. I did not want to be there. I was being threatened with the murder of myself and my mother and, like, other family members. So the forced pornography and the forced prostitution, that happened to me. There was also a prostitution version of that. That happened to me as, like, a kid and as an adult. So... couple of my friends went through the same thing. It's all very confusing. My life is basically like one of those psychological thrillers. I hate it. I wish I had a less ambiguous life. I just switched. I'm red and blue. I'm writing a story right now. I'm almost done with it. I'm starting to write a second story. The second story I think will be publishable, whereas I don't think the first series would really be publishable with a traditional publisher, which is okay. I mean... But I need money, you know, because when my mom eventually dies, because she's quite old, I'll end up being homeless, so. Okay. What was I just talking about? I wrote some notes to myself. Let me look at these. Oh, sexuality and DID. I'm a female identity. Yeah, I never would have been able to do that transition. But yeah, so I was going to get on hormones and everything. I was using the male restroom. My name was Jack. And... then it stopped. I switched back to a main identity that was female, and I had extreme dysphoria for being female, so I went back to presenting as female. So sexuality and gender is very confusing with DID. Personally, I prefer men, usually. What else? Oh, surviving being raped. So you know how there was the forced prostitution and the forced porn thing? Well, the guys that were raping me in the prostitution thing, I guess I keep describing this as gender sexuality conversion therapy, and I do think I experienced someone's attempt to do it. But it was like, okay, so imagine if at night you're basically getting roofied and like taken to a forced pornography / prostitution thing. And when you're there, several different people, like let's say there's a guy that's continuously raping you. He'll just be like, well, I've heard you're trans. I've got some ideas on how to get rid of that. And then he kind of like tortures you over the concept and like makes men rape you and stuff. So that isn't really sexuality conversion therapy, but he and his friends did have an expectation that this kind of like experiment almost would work. Actually, it made things much worse. The alternate identities that experience themselves as male or an alternate sexuality are like identities that feel very distant from me, so it made it worse by making that problem worse. So there was that. And then there were specific people, rapists in the ring, you know, that were like raping my partially unconscious body. They were just shouting like, oh my god, you're a tranny, blah, blah, blah. Oh my god, you're actually a lesbian. You know, you can never love a man. You know, I got tortured over it by different individuals. So there's that. That did happen. Sadistic rape is interesting. I've been thinking a lot about it. for a lot of sadistic rapists, and some of them would talk to me about it while they were raping me, because, you know, like, I'm basically unconscious, so sometimes they would talk to me, you know, basically, just imagine a bunch of men, mostly. There were a couple of women that use you as, like, a real doll. Some of them torture you, so that's, like, its own thing, but the ones that aren't into torturing you basically use you like a real doll, their personal real doll, so you're, like, partially, mostly unconscious, maybe paralyzed, and because of the drugs, you know, like ketamine and paralytics like that. And so they say a lot of weird things and interesting things to you. I like to think of it as, it's like, oh, by the way, I'm an organized abuse identity, but from adulthood. I'm from a couple different times in my life, really. But so they'll, like, confess really weird things to you, I guess. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe some of them had a transgender, transsexual fetish, maybe, and that heightened the arousal for them. But I did find that some of the rapists, it was really more about sex, but with some, I think they really wanted me to die. Like, they weren't allowed to just, like, stab me to death in the ring or whatever, I guess, but they, like, kind of tried to egg me into killing myself. People kept up with me by, like, keylogging me. At least they did in Toledo. I've talked about Drew a lot and how he had my internet output keylogged. Speaking of which, I went through a weird thing last summer where a bunch of email accounts emailed me with really weird links and were like, your lesbian wife is waiting for you, and a bunch of stuff like that. I started getting the emails to my number again. I wish my phone was here. And that really annoys me. I don't know if it's related to that, but that's a pain in the ass. So yeah, it's kind of a weird trauma to have gone through this, like, whole forced human trafficking thing. It's very frightening, and I live in terror of getting abducted again. I do get assaulted every so often. So what else was I going to talk about here? Oh, recruitment. So speaking of dark sexualities, I mean, like, let's not call it a sexuality. I shouldn't make that joke. Sexuality is beautiful. These people were criminals. So let's talk about the criminal mind. So, okay, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, they recruited people, I guess, you know, this ring of, like, dudes molesting kids and, like, raping women. I guess they recruited people, and they specifically had, like, different personality profiles that they wanted. Like, they wanted pedophiles, rapists, people that were, like, violent, not stalkers, just people who had, like, an abnormal violent sexuality. People who wanted to kill, like, wannabe serial killers. I was told that because I'm a nice, normal person with empathy, they have to give me schizophrenia for the good of the community, aka the ring. The ring was the community. And so I was being sacrificed. One person made it very personal by bringing my stupid spirituality into it. I used to, like, do little witchcraft things with Quetzalcoatl. Some part of me enjoys being spiritual and doing witchcraft and whatever. I'm not that version of me. I laugh at that version. But that's okay. Power to me, I suppose. Usually I'm very rational and scientifically minded. So I was Quetzalcoatl's sacrifice according to this one bitch who was just being an asshole when she said that. What else was I gonna talk about with this? Oh yeah, so I was definitely not gonna be recruited, and they told me they were gonna, like, a couple of them had, like, recipes for how to make sure I'd never remember, and it would destroy my face memory and turn me into a schizophrenic who wouldn't even be able to tell if someone was my mom or my dad or not. Actually, that threat is so chilling. I tried to kill myself back a couple months ago, and when I was in the psych ward, there was this woman there who had this very particular type of schizophrenia. I was talking to her because I had nothing else going on. Psych wards are the most boring places of all time. And she was just like, you're my son, I'm your dad. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my fucking God. It's like, it was so fucking annoying. I felt so bad for that woman. I'm like, and she was very clearly battered. Like, she had a black eye and everything. I'm just like, this poor woman, Her mental illness made her into the most fucking annoying person on the planet. And I got threatened with the idea that they would, like, the human traffickers threatened to give me poisons. Poisons is in, like, you know, if you chronically dose someone with methamphetamine, for instance, or mercury for a few years, it'll cause permanent psychosis. Or if you stun gun someone on the head a bunch of times, that also causes permanent psychosis. And then they did actually do those things to me. So, well, I haven't started hearing or seeing things that aren't there yet. So they were apparently unsuccessful in their attempt to give me schizophrenia. However, still, it was still a chilling threat. I sometimes meet people with schizophrenia, and the guy, a couple of them who had, they had what I would describe as a schizophrenia fetish. Like, they enjoyed the mental degradation of someone's mind, and that was, like, their thrill. And I got variations of that threat from a couple of people like that. And there were a couple of other people that had, like, a chronic illness, just, like, all kinds of illnesses, not just mental ones. They had, like, this chronic poisoning fetish, almost. So, very disturbing individuals. What else was on the docket? So, yeah, they tried to give me schizophrenia because I'm not into kids or rape or killing people, you know, like a normal person. In the real world, those sorts of traits are valued. Like, being bisexual is okay. Wanting to have consensual sex and consensual relationships with adults is okay. But these people are not living in the real world, so. Oh, yeah, zoophiles. That was another type of person that they liked. So yeah, I talked about the hate crime over my sexuality, which was really just some dudes raping me while talking about my sexuality and trying to, like, upset me with it. Some of them, I think, had, like, a tranny fetish or something. I don't know. And they just couldn't live with themselves over it. I have no fucking idea. These people were not well adjusted. So yeah, that's a trauma I deal with. People tried to permanently maim me, and they were to some extent successful. I do not have schizophrenia, but I have every other mental illness, so, aside from the personality disorders. So, I think they were, successful. That makes me really mad. So the trauma of going through multiple attempts for multiple individuals to permanently maim me, both mentally and physically, is upsetting. There was this guy who, like, electrocuted me on the shins where I had hurt them. I keep feeling like I fractured them, but I don't think I did. I don't remember ever breaking any bones, but I definitely injured them in this particular area, and he kept, like, electrocuting them, and it's just like, I'm gonna hobble you, like in that book Misery. This guy, Geiger, loved the Stephen King books, and sometimes would give really fruity threats based either what. A lot of them, okay, since they kept up with me, since I was basically being forcibly abducted, and, you know, there was the guy that was keylogging me, and I know he was keylogging me because he showed me the stupid little program in his phone. So they kept up with me, and they would, like, sadistically torture me over my hobbies and stuff. So I would get all kinds of really vivid threats. But that guy liked Stephen King, and so did I. It's like, it'll be just like in Stephen King, where he, where the woman hobbles him, and then I'm gonna torture you over how bad. Oh yeah, and then he'd come over to my apartment back when I lived with John. He'd, like, torture me over the stuff I was writing. They said they were gonna give me aphantasia and stuff like that. They were, like, obsessed with destroying my ability to use and enjoy my imagination. One thing he tried to do was he would kill animals. He was obsessed with killing animals. He even wrote poetry and published it about killing animals. And he would make me look at his rotting dead animals, and while forcing me to do DMT. And there was something else in there that was not a psychedelic hallucinogen, but was hallucinogenic, that he made me do under, like, threat of death before knocking me out. And he would just be like, yeah, no, you're going to hallucinate all my dead animals inside your mind, and you're going to eventually become a real schizo, and you're going to, like, no offense to anyone with schizophrenia, you're just as valid and beautiful as anyone else. This guy wanted to kill schizophrenic people after turning people schizophrenic. And he was just like, yeah, and then you're going to start hallucinating my dead, rotting animals all over the place when you're really schizophrenic. So that didn't happen, fortunately, but I do have bad flashbacks of it. They stunned me a lot all over my body, on major nerve points, repeatedly on the head, and I'm going through all of those flashbacks. I'm going to record myself having a flashback so people can see how excruciating it is. But yeah, I can't fucking believe it. It's one of the worst traumas is I mean, there's a murder attempt kind of embedded in these traumas here, but being permanently maimed, especially by these stupid and horrible people, is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. I feel like that's kind of it. I kind of got off topic a little bit. I just wanted to talk about sexuality and DID. Then I got talking about the hate crime. Um, yeah, I think that's about it. But yeah, what a disturbing circumstance. That was one trauma that was very hyper particular. The people in this ring, a bunch of them were professors, some of which dealt with psychology or neurology. They kind of had a fetish for experimenting on people and seeing what they could do to them. Of course, you know, for me, a lot of my threats, well, I found it threatening. It was really not so much a threat on their part as it was a sadistic thing they were saying, because that was what was turning them on about the situation. See, that's why you go to human trafficking, to get a prostitute. They call me a prostitute for them. Like, my unconscious body that they were torturing to death was like, they said they were using me as a prostitute. So I was their, like, sadistic torture prostitute. I'm just like, you're abducting me. Like, I don't want to be a prostitute. How do I stop this? It was so fucking horrible. But yeah, so that's why you get an abducted prostitute, or, well, I'm not a prostitute, an abducted victim, instead of getting a normal prostitute like a sugar baby. It's the sadistic torture and the schizophrenia thing. Where else can you get this experience except the wild and wacky world of human trafficking? And that's what I actually experienced. I can't wait for my next session with my therapist. I believe it's on the 27th. I have a lot to talk about, mostly related to this stuff. Stupid medication gives me emotions over this crap, and it's tough to deal with. So thank you, internet, for being my therapist today. I have a real therapist, though. Don't you worry about me. Take care, everybody.